Okay, let's focus now on the big Premier League news over the international break. Is that Steven Gerrard is in at Aston Villa, and I want to know, what does his inbox look like? What does he need to do at Aston Villa to turn them into what they want to be, which is a team challenging for European qualification? Andy, I want to come to you first. Of course, Dean Smith has left. He's already in a job at Norwich. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. It didn't last long on the job market there, out in free agency. But Steven Gerrard, what does he need to do to get Villa moving in the right direction? They've got a home game against Brighton as his first game in charge, so that's going to be a tough one. But long term, what are the big issues he needs to solve?
Well, first things first, get the defense defending again. They have been horrific during this 5-game losing skid. The number of goals that they've conceded, they've given up 2, they've given up 3, they've given up 3, they've given up 4. And they just gave up 1 to Southampton last time out. So maybe things slowly turning a little bit there. But I think that's number one. Obviously, the transitional period that the club is in after selling Jack Grealish in the summer, that's something that I think that we move on to quickly from after a major transfer, especially an outgoing transfer happens, how quickly we expect things to return to normal service and just get the results like you did before you sold, one of the most influential and best players in the club's history. I think that's a little bit, it's obviously short-sighted, but so for Gerrard coming in, if he can get the defense just a little bit solidified there, then I think that solves a lot of problems for them, because I think I've probably watched 4 or 5, maybe 6 of Aston Villa's games this season very closely, and that's a mentality issue for them for me, the fact that every time, it's a little bit of Southampton actually, Joe, where we would talk about last year, Southampton, one thing would go against them, heads would drop, morale would drop, and everything just fell apart. And that seems to be what it is with Villa, and it always starts at the defensive end. So, whether it's Tyrone Mings, Ezri Konsa, whether it's individuals, whether it's tactically, whatever it is for Aston Villa, he's got to get them defending a little bit better, just be difficult to beat. And so now we get to start seeing what Steven Gerrard is as a manager, because you can't really take Rangers or Celtic as a great example in Scotland because they are so dominant there. He's at a normal Premier League club now. Let's see what he does.
Yeah, I'm excited for that because, like you said, the mentality aspect is exactly what Gerrard was great at as a player and as a manager. That seems to be one of the things that Rangers players and fans and everyone connected to the club really heralded to their success of wrestling the title back from Celtic and having some really good runs in the Europa League. And I'm looking at the table from last season. In 38 games, yes, it's the Scottish Premiership, but they only conceded 13 goals, Rangers. So that shows you defensively, whenever I watched them very closely in the Europa League, they were always very solid, Rangers, always stayed in games. And yeah, that kind of points to that organizational point that you were mentioning there, Andy, about Gerrard, because, yeah, I think it is a mentality aspect there. I don't think there's an awful lot wrong with the playing squad. You look at Danny Ings, Leon Bailey, Buendia, Tyrone Mings, John McGinn, Douglas Luiz, Emiliano Martinez, a spine there of a great team. I mean, he's probably going to change things a little bit, but there's not an awful lot wrong. And I do, like we said before, think that Dean Smith was a bit unlucky to lose his job, but Villa were ruthless, brought Gerrard in to do one thing and one thing only, and that's progress them. It's going to be a huge challenge, though, in his first job in the Premier League. So, Nick, my question for you is, where do you think he can take Villa, and do you think he's the right man at the right time for them? Because, as I said, it's a big challenge for him, but he will definitely be backed in the transfer market. They're very well funded and have a lot of resources there at Villa. So it seems like kind of too good of an opportunity for Gerrard to turn down, right?
Oh, it absolutely is. And Villa's done that old trick that you kind of feel bad when you like the manager and it happens to them. Look at their last few games. Their run was Chelsea, Everton, Man United, Spurs, Wolves, Arsenal, West Ham, Saints. So it was like, oh, well, I guess we'll see if he can win at Saints. That'll be his one chance, I'm actually going to be rooting for Dean Smith and the Canaries. But I think the biggest issue for any manager now, this is going to become somewhat of more of a manager's league than it has been in some time, because there are so few bad teams. That every week is a real challenge. And the teams coming up, as we've seen over the last few years, we've seen Wolves come up and Brentford come up. And I think, Joe, you're the one or maybe it's Andy, one of you two has been fond of saying that There are teams that are coming up from the Championship that might be better suited to the Premier League than the Championship. It's one of the reasons I'm very worried for a team we're going to talk about in a few minutes in Newcastle. So what is it with Gerrard? Honestly, I think he's just got to steady the ship for now, but the players are there, and he's going to have to prove his mettle matching up against the guys who would keep them out of the top 7, because I do think the ingredients are there. Dean Smith obviously became disillusioned with Tyrone Mings, but I don't think Mings has been the problem at Villa. And will we see? The biggest question for me is going to be which player is Jurgen Klopp going to give him for the second half of the season? Is it going to be Joe Gomez to steady the back? Is it going to be somebody else? Because that's the most interesting thing for me. Is it going to be one of the young guns? Because someone from Liverpool is going to Villa in January. That's a promise.
And that's a great point, because that was going to be my next point, that this, for Gerrard, the hunger, the motivation to not just do well for Aston Villa, but he's almost got that carrot dangling there that Jurgen Klopp, I think we all say, and he said himself, he's not going to be at Liverpool forever. And he's probably coming towards the last 2 or 3 years, maybe at Liverpool, before he steps away. And that would almost be perfect timing. If Gerrard had a good 1 or 2 seasons at Villa now, proved himself in the Premier League, and Jurgen's leaving, let's bring in a Liverpool legend that the fans are going to be delighted to see come back as manager. And that's part of the master plan, I think, for Gerrard. Maybe that's too simplistic to say, and Aston Villa fans probably won't want to be thinking about him leaving already because he hasn't even taken charge of a game yet. But if he does do well, then those links to Liverpool are going to come up straight away if he proves himself as a manager in the Premier League. Talking about Newcastle then, Nick, obviously Eddie Howe takes charge of his first game against Brentford at home. So that's a pretty kind first game. What do you expect from Newcastle, Nick? Because Eddie Howe, we said before, was a great attacking and possession-based coach, but defensively is where Newcastle really need to improve. But that he has to get off and running on the right foot, right, with a home win against Brentford.
I think Newcastle and Burnley, along with Norwich, are the 3 worst teams in the league. And I think where we're in a position of now is Eddie Howe going to be able to do enough exciting stuff without, maybe John Joe Shelby being healthy will help him spot. He loves a big switch. Maybe it'll help him spot St. Maximin in places. Maybe Miguel Almiron is going to be used, I would imagine, in a much better way under a better manager. And Callum Wilson can finish. So they need to start looking better and looking more attractive. And I hate to be this simplistic, but again, mentioning that there are so few bad teams around. Maybe Watford is in the discussion, that they need to look attractive for players to come to in January. Because if they're looking at this and saying, yeah, look, I can go there and I can be a part of something, but I don't want to play in the Championship next year. And I think that's a very real danger for Newcastle. And I don't think that's an Eddie Howe problem. I think it's whoever they would have hired problem that he's inherited, and it's going to take something special. It really will, because there are not really bad teams in this division this year. Maybe it'll change over time, but right now it looks like all the teams investing for so long and a little bit of that trickle down of buying the best players for high prices from the Championship has made it harder than ever to go up, to stay up without really investing a lot.
And Newcastle, obviously the only Premier League team yet to win a game this season, so they really need to do that. And the only team below them is Norwich City, Andy. They've hired Dean Smith after he's fired, as we said, somewhat harshly by Aston Villa. He's come in for Daniel Farke. It's a pretty good fit, isn't it? And he has, again, like Eddie Howe, a pretty winnable first game in charge at home against Southampton. His last game as Villa's manager was against Southampton, so he doesn't need to do much scouting on them. He knows how to play against them. What do you think about that appointment and Norwich's chances overall of staying up?
I feel like we're at risk of becoming the Norwich haters here, me especially, because every time it seems like every week I get to talk about him, and it's always really negative. I feel my thoughts on Dean Smith taking the Norwich job is I can't believe he had to take the Norwich job. I can't believe that he didn't think there would be something better in a month or 2 months or 3. I think Dean Smith is a good coach. I mean, I saw a lot of what he did while at Brentford in the Championship, set them on the path to get to the Premier League. Thomas Frank took over, got him there. Dean Smith was really good the last year, and in the championship season to bring them up as well. They had struggles when they came up and got promoted. He got them over the line, and they were really good for the majority of last season. They fell off a little bit at the end, and we already talked about Grealish going. I just don't know what more Dean Smith could have done other than making individual players play better and defend better to start the season. And it's in a transitional time, that's always going to be an issue. So I feel like he should have been a little more patient and waited for, I know they already replaced their manager, but the next kind of Watford job, that where a team actually has a chance, I think, of staying up in the Premier League this season, because he is going there for not even really a relegation battle. He's going down to guide them into the championship, and I think he deserves a little better than that.
I agree. Yeah, it's a good appointment in terms of, okay, if you keep us up, that's a bonus, but on the other side of things, you've already got Aston Villa promoted from the Premier League. You have experience in the Championship. So it's kind of both sides of it, right? Norwich have looked at it and said, we're covered either way, and he can be here long term, and we won't have to chop and change the manager. And he'll fit into our model of developing young players, playing an attractive style, and then we'll see what happens. So, yeah, I think it's a good appointment. And like you said, for Dean Smith, he probably would have thought somewhere else would come up. Maybe the Watford job, because they chop and change so much. But yeah, I think Norwich have done pretty well to get him. And obviously Frank Lampard and others were linked, but Dean Smith is a very, very good fit for that job. And I want to add, Newcastle play Norwich week 14, so a couple of weekends from now. That seems like a massive game for those two teams to try, and for those two new managers as well, to try and get some momentum going and build up towards the festive period. Remember, Pro Soccer Talk and NBCSports.com is your hub for all the latest Premier League news. We'll have analysis, recaps, schedules on all of these teams, all the new managers. We'll let you know how they're getting on in their new jobs, because there's been a lot of movement in the managerial merry-go-round early in the Premier League season.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch highlights all season long, and be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend at 7 a.m. Eastern. And for even more content, head over to Peacock, where we've got live games, original series, and a dedicated round-the-clock Premier League channel featuring studio shows, classic matches, and much more.